postponed. I apologize, we're running about 50 minutes late. I guess we're a victim of our own success. We have about 60 people who did not register but who want to come in. So we're trying to accommodate them by expanding the room. So if you give us another 15 minutes, you won't be disappointed. Thank you.
And stakeholder relations with the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority. Before we begin our formal program today, I have a few administrative details to go over. This morning's meeting is anticipated to conclude prior to noon today. I would ask that you set any mobile devices to silent or vibrate to ensure that other participants are not disturbed during the presentation. This meeting this morning will include a presentation which will be made available within the next week on www.wdbridge.com and on www.mercs.com. It will be available in both English and French. For any attendees who require a French copy of the presentation, please let us know. There are hard copies in French available at the front table. When you signed in today, you were provided with a list of all companies who registered for the session. If you did not get one, there are additional sheets available at the registration table. The purpose of this morning's session is to provide you with an overview of the scope of the Gordie Howe International Bridge request for qualifications. Should you have any questions coming out of this session, please follow the request for information process detailed in the request for qualifications. A question and answer period will not be included in today's session. Many of you in attendance this morning have also registered for the Industry Day taking place this afternoon. Please visit the registration table on the first floor prior to the 1 p.m. start time of that session to pick up a list of companies attending that session and to be given your table assignment. For those of you who are attending the Industry Day, your name tag has been color-coded with stickers. Green indicates a potential respondent to the RFQ. Red indicates a subcontractor or company looking to partner with a larger company. Blue is for staff, and yellow indicates observers. This information will be reviewed again at the start of the Industry Day. With that, I would like to introduce Michael Cotillo, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority, to begin today's introductory project meeting.
Thank you, Heather. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority, I want to thank each of you for your interest in the new Gordie Howe International Bridge. And I have to tell you that I'm really excited to see such a very strong local, national, and international interest in our request for qualifications and in our project in general. On July 20th, we issued the request for qualifications, basically kicking off a two-stage procurement process which will ultimately lead to the selection of a private sector partner to join us in the design, the construction, the maintenance, and the operation of the new Gordie Howe International Bridge. And the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority began operations just over a year ago, and much has been accomplished over the past 12 months. The release of the request for qualifications is perhaps the most significant milestone in our very short history. But I would be remiss if I did not mention the many years of work that led to this point. Work that was done by Canada, the United States, Michigan, and Ontario in concluding the environmental studies and the preparatory work that was required before we could start the procurement and ultimately the construction of the project. The Gordie Howe International Bridge project is the largest infrastructure project on the Canada-US border and arguably is one of the largest infrastructure projects in North America. But it's more than just that. The new Gordie Howe International Bridge is the first new international bridge that's being built between Canada and the United States in many years. The project represents a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for you to be part of an endeavor that will benefit Ontario, Michigan, Canada, and the United States. Once completed, and during its many years of operation, the Gordie Howe International Bridge will be an iconic symbol of the partnership and the friendship between both countries. This afternoon, as Heather mentioned, many of you will also have the opportunity to meet with local, regional, and national contractors, suppliers, and service providers. And I encourage you to use that opportunity to talk to each other. I urge you to take advantage of the session itself so you can witness firsthand the enthusiasm for the work that has to be undertaken for this project and learn about the level of experience, expertise that local companies can provide for the project. Finally, I'd like to thank a few organizations, including the Heavy Construction Association of Windsor, Jim Lyons, the Windsor Construction Association, the Detroit Regional Chamber, and the Michigan Infrastructure and Transportation Association for partnering with us on the Industry Day. And as some of you know, we have the same parallel presentation and Industry Day tomorrow in Detroit. The collaboration that I've mentioned sent a strong signal that this region's business are ready to partner with people. Again, thank you for attending the session and a good rest of the meeting.
I would now like to bring forward Andy Doctoroff, Special Advisor to the Governor of Michigan.
Bonjour tout le monde. C'est un grand plaisir d'être aujourd'hui. And that's the end of my French. That's the combination of 6 years of studying in high school. I want to bring greetings from Michigan. Michigan and Canada have been working as in true partnership on this project for many years. And we look at today as an important milestone, and it's great to see such a significant turnout with everyone in this room. We also, like Mike said, want to strongly encourage everyone here to meet with the local and regional companies at the Industry Day sessions later on. These regional companies, local companies, bring significant experience and value to the private sector bidders, yourselves, who would be working on this project. And we want that conversation to be robust, and we, again, encourage that. With that, we just wanted to say we're thrilled about this project. We're thrilled where it is. We're happy to be partners with Canada and the wonderful WDBA, and we hope you have a very informative and productive session today. Thank you, everyone.
I would now like to introduce Leslie Martin. Leslie is the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority's Executive Vice President of Engineering and Operations, and Leslie will be delivering the presentation for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Good morning to everyone. Great to see a full room, and we look forward to a productive day. So, the presentation today I'm making, and it's my pleasure to make on behalf of the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority. We'll cover an introduction to the project, we'll highlight some of the key features of the project, and then we'll also focus on the procurement process, and in particular the RFQ that was issued on July 20th. So, a few points about today's meeting. Attendance at today's meeting is not a mandatory requirement of the proposal or the RFQ. For the benefit of all, there is a list of attendees available, and that can be obtained by submitting through the contact person and requesting that list, and you can get a copy of it. The other item is that no information from the meeting may be relied upon that we discussed today unless it's set out in a subsequent addendum. And as Heather mentioned, there is a process for asking questions in the RFQ. Just a little bit about the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority. It was created back in October of 2012, and over the past year the staffing and the operations has begun. Mike started here as the President and CEO about 1 year ago, so the WDBA has been fully functioning now for a year. The WDBA is a not-for-profit Crown corporation, and its mandate is to oversee and manage the procurement process for the design, construction, financing, operations and maintenance of the new bridge between Windsor and Detroit, and through a public-private partnership. The Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority will also oversee and manage the construction and operation of the new crossing, and the authority will also set and collect the tolls. The Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority is led by Mike Cotillo as the CEO, and is also governed by a board of directors. I should also mention that there is a joint Canadian-Michigan governance entity called the International Authority, and that board oversees key steps in the procurement process for the new Windsor-Detroit crossing. And the International Authority is also responsible for monitoring compliance of the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority with the crossing agreement between Canada and Michigan. As Andy and Mike had talked about, there's many partners that we collaborate with on this project, specifically the Canadian government, and in particular Transport Canada, the US Federal Highway Administration, and the Michigan Department of Transportation. And given that it's a major international border, we have close cooperation with the Canada Border Services Agency, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and again on the US side, we work closely with the General Services Administration and the US Customs and Border Protection. There are many people involved in a project of this magnitude, and for the launch of the Pre-3 procurement, WDBA has retained over the last year a number of key advisors and consultants. For the general engineering, we have Parsons. They have been involved in the early planning of the project and have a long history in the project. We also have Deloitte as the financial and transaction advisor, and we also have Blair Franklin for capital markets advisor. Faskin Martineau is our P3 legal advisor, and the whole process, we have a fairness monitor in place, which is P1 Consulting, and we have Oliver Grant here today from P1 Consulting to oversee this meeting as well. In addition, we have some key government participants, and we're taking advantage of the public sector best practices that is offered by Public Works and Government Services Canada, and their many years of procurement experience and their integrity framework. So, due to the significance of this trade corridor, the Border Transportation Partnership, composed of the US Federal Highway Administration, the Michigan Department of Transportation, Transport Canada, and the Ontario Ministry of Transportation, committed to provide an end-to-end border transportation solution to provide a publicly owned border crossing in southwest Ontario and southwest Michigan. And that was maybe some 15 years ago, so the project is a long time in fruition, and we're really moving forward now. There are four major components to the Gordie Howe International Bridge. We have the main bridge itself, we have the US port of entry, the Canadian port of entry, and also a significant Michigan interchange where the ramps to and from the US Plaza connect to I-75. Just next slide. Just a little bit of the history and the objectives of the project. The goal of the new crossings to provide a safe, efficient and secure end-to-end border crossing system directly connecting Highway 401 in Windsor with the Interstate 75 in Detroit. And as such a key regional transportation project, the border crossing will meet the capacity needs of the long-term travel demand, both commercial and passenger vehicles. The system connectivity connecting 401 and I-75 will provide a free flow of goods and people. The new facilities will provide improved operations and processing at the border, and it will also provide reasonable and secure crossing options. As Andy said, the project is a key priority for Michigan and for Canada. Both the Canadian and the US governments, as well as the private sector shippers, carriers and manufacturers, are anxious to see this project built. The additional capacity will also stimulate growth and provide long-term economic growth for both Michigan and Canada. Mike touched a bit on the history of the project, going back many years. It has been a long but necessary process to get where we are today with the issuance of the RFQ and the launch of the procurement process. Back in 2000, there was the Border Transportation Partnership was established with both governments, the province and the state. At that time there was a traffic study, followed in 2002, 2003 with a planning and needs and feasibility study. And that looked at a transportation strategy for Southwest Ontario and Southeast Michigan, looking out for the needs of, at that time, the next 30 years. And looking at various crossing initiatives. So in 2005, following completion of the feasibility study, the DRIC study was established, the Detroit River International Crossing Study. And that was an environmental assessment that complied with the Ontario Environmental Assessment, the Canadian Environmental Assessment, and the US National Environmental Policy Act. The binational study took 3 or 4 years and was approved in 2009. And in fact, in 2008, the Ontario government moved forward with the Ontario Access Road, as it was referred to then, is now known as the Right Honourable Herb Gray Parkway. And just recently, the first 8 kilometres of that highway has been opened and is a key component of the point-to-point solution that we've referred to. So after the environmental assessments were approved, there were a number of milestones achieved over the last several years. Notably, the crossing agreement signed by both Canada and Michigan was signed in 2012, and that enabled the building of the new publicly owned crossing. Furthermore, in 2013, the US State Department issued the presidential permit, another important milestone, and that provided US federal approval for the construction, connection, operation and maintenance of the new publicly owned bridge. Again, another milestone, 2014, yet another permit from the US Coast Guard to construct a new bridge over the Detroit River. Then in 2012 was also the establishment of the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority. The board of directors of the authority, of both the International Authority and the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority, were appointed in 2014. In 2015, the International Authority approved the commencement of land acquisition on the US side of the border. Land acquisition in the Canadian side had been continuing for several years. The Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority also this spring issued the early works contract for the Canadian Plaza. Much of this background information is available on the project website, wdbridge.com, and there's also links to other earlier studies. I mentioned the early works activities. It was back now in early June that we issued the request for tenders, and these are currently being evaluated, and the intent of that is to move forward with construction on the Canadian Plaza of a new perimeter access road around the plaza, so we can decommission some of the existing roads, and also to relocate utilities outside of the plaza footprint. We also added, in terms of improving and helping to achieve the broader timeline for project completion, we included in that contract the plaza fill and grading, so that there's about 1 million cubic meters of fill to advance the construction foundation for the future buildings in the plaza. We are currently evaluating the tenders for the early works, which is a separate procurement from the P3 procurement. Now touching on some of the project's key features. The Canadian Port of Entry. The site itself is some 53 hectares, and it houses the inbound and outbound customs processing facilities for both the commercial and the passenger vehicles. In addition, the toll collection for the Gordie Howe International Bridge will occur on the Canadian Plaza for both inbound and outbound directions. There's also space on the plaza for maintenance facilities and also parking. For the bridge itself is a very significant structure. As earlier studies had indicated, and we're carrying forward 2 options, a cable stay bridge and also a suspension bridge. Both of these structures in their own right will be significant in terms of the importance and the span length relative to other bridges in North America and even around the world. The bridge will be a 6-lane bridge, and the main span is 850 meters with main piers on both banks of the river and no piers in the water. The overall length of the bridge is about 2.5 kilometers, including the approaches. The US Port of Entry, again it's a similar size site, it's 60 hectares, housing the US border inspection facilities for both passengers and commercial vehicles, both the primary and secondary inspection facilities, as well as the non-intrusive inspection facilities, and also facilities for US Drug and Food Enforcement Agency, and also the Nexus. There's going to be a Nexus processing facility there as well as parking. The Michigan interchange we refer to is the main interchange on I-75 with the connecting ramps. There's 4 directional ramps to and from the freeway that connect directly to the US Port of Entry. In order to accommodate that on I-75, we have to rebuild about 3 kilometers of the highway, and that affects a number of interchanges So we have to rebuild 4 main crossing roads. We also have to rebuild 5 pedestrian bridges. And in order to make room for all of these ramps, we have to widen the freeway and also impact the service drives on both the north and south side of the freeway. There are also a number of localized road improvements to accommodate access to the new plaza. More details on all of the facility components can be found in section 2.6 of the RFQ. Touching now on some of the commercial considerations, the project features relate to equipment, services, life cycle and maintenance, and tolling infrastructure and toll collection. Again, more details on these and additional requirements for the private sector partner, or project co as we refer to it, as can be found in section 3.5 of the RFQ. The facility to be developed will accommodate installation and use of specific and specialized equipment for the border agencies. The provision of the services will be required, and that will include snow and ice removal, site and building maintenance, cleaning, waste management and security services. The facility and the utilities connected to it will need to be maintained, again to defined standards. So an important component is the tolling infrastructure. The design, procurement, construction and installation, as well as the operation, maintenance and life cycle of the toll collection system will be required, including staffing for manual toll collection and the provision of cash management services, recording and delivering transaction data and delivering that to the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority. So we're looking for the processing data, toll collection and remission of the toll revenues as required by the authority. And we will also be expecting the private partner to handle the customer service issues. Many of the key commercial terms can be found in section 3.6 of the RFQ. The term of the project agreement commencing at the end of construction is envisaged to be not less than 30 years. The RFP, when it's issued, will include details of payments during the construction phase. The project agreement will also include provisions for performance and also the quality standards expected and provisions for deduction of payments for non-performance or non-availability. The Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority anticipates that the following commercial terms will not be open to negotiation, and they relate to the title of the property and the facility, assignment or change control. There are specific Buy America and Buy Canadian requirements and other crossing agreement requirements. There are also specific US federal aid eligibility requirements and other US contracting requirements. So there are details, further details concerning these issues in the crossing agreement, and also they can be found in section 2.7 of the RFQ. A little bit more on the procurement process. So we've launched a more or less standard procurement process for public-private partnerships. It's a two-stage proposal or procurement. The first stage being the request for qualifications, which commenced on July 20th. The second stage, the request for proposals, will result in the selection of a private sector partner, and that will commence when we announce the shortlisted proponents and the release of the RFP, and this is anticipated to occur in December of this year. The proponents will submit binding technical and financial proposals, including a fixed price and schedule. The process will be rigorous, fair, open and transparent. The RFQ process is a public process and open to all interested parties. So the RFQ will qualify applicant teams based on your experience in designing, constructing, financing, operating and maintaining a project of this size and complexity. Up to 3 respondents will be shortlisted to proceed to the request for proposal stage. The RFP process is more detailed, requiring the qualified respondents from the RFQ to submit proposals on how the project will be delivered. The process will include collaborative meetings and the RFP submission itself. The RFP will result in the selection of the preferred proponent. The form of the RFP submission will be described in the RFP and will address both technical and financial aspects of the project. And it's anticipated that the RFP process will include an interim financial submission, a technical submission, addressing the technical aspects of the project, and a final financial submission. More information on the RFP process can be found in sections 410 through 413 of the RFQ. Regarding the RFQ timetable, these are some of the key dates you need to be aware of following the introductory project meetings today. September 18th is the last day for submitting requests permitting a person to be a member of more than one team. It's also the last day for submitting requests for advance rulings relating to eligible parties and conflict of interest. And it's also the last day for submitting requests for information. September 28th will be the last day for the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority to issue addenda for the RFQ, which is due on October 9th. We reserve November 17th or thereafter to hold interviews if we see fit with any of the respondents. And we anticipate that on or before December 15th, we'll be in a position to announce the shortlisted proponents. There will be additional activities and timetables provided prior to and during the RFP process. Regarding the RFP, the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority anticipate that the RFP open period will be approximately 8 months, with submission of the technical and financial proposals. The Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority wants this project open and operating by 2020, and that is a government position as well. In summary, the RFQ highlights, again, just to be clear, we're going to shortlist a maximum of 3 respondents, and the contract will involve a design, build, finance, operate and maintain of the Canadian and US ports of entry, the main bridge over the Detroit River, and will also include a design build finance for the I-75 interchange. There is no honorarium for the RFQ, but there will be a $5 million honorarium for the unsuccessful proponents during the RFP process. There is no bid security required with the RFQ, but the shortlisted respondents will be expected to lodge a bid security deposit in the amount of $5 million. Just touching on the responsibilities of the parties, the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority is the project authority for the delivery of the entire project and is responsible for directing all project activities, for hiring advisors, for flowing the funds, and for working closely and collaboratively with our partners, the government departments and agencies in both Canada and the US. And WDBA will be the contracting authority with the successful project co. The responsibilities of project co. The general scope of responsibilities are outlined in section 3.5 of the RFQ, and these will be confirmed in the RFP and further defined in the project agreement. As an overview, Project Co will be responsible for all aspects of the design of the facility in compliance with output specifications that will be included in the RFP and the project agreement. Project Co will also be responsible for obtaining all permits and approvals necessary for construction of the facility, excluding those that we have already obtained, that are the responsibility of WDBA. Project Co will also be responsible for the provision of utilities and other site services that have already been completed and required to support the facility, including any remaining works as required to connect the facility to existing roads, services and utilities. Project Co is also responsible for compliance with applicable provisions of the crossing agreement. And as shown in the chart, Project Co is responsible for design, construction, financing, operations and maintenance, and life cycle maintenance, rehabilitation and handover requirements for the bridge, the Canadian port of entry, including the tolling infrastructure, and the US port of entry. Project Co will also be responsible for the design, construction and financing of the Michigan interchange. The Michigan Department of Transportation will be responsible for the operations and maintenance and life cycle and maintenance rehabilitation of the Michigan interchange. Just to note, the Canada Border Services Agency will operate the Canadian port of entry, and the US Customs and Border Protection will operate the US port of entry. They will carry out their normal customs inspection and other border-related functions, while Project Co will be responsible for the custodial functions and other building-related operations and maintenance. Your attention is drawn to the mandatory requirements of the RFQ. Please review the mandatory requirements set out in section 6.3, which speak to the requirements for design and construction of long-span bridges, design and construction of interstate interchanges, and also requirements for financial capacity. Some of the submission requirements. In detailing your previous experience, please include information on the development and execution of community benefits plans and consultations addressing environmental, economic, social and other residential, occupational and community impacts and concerns, with an emphasis on the outcomes of such plans. Again, relating to your previous experience, please include information regarding engagement with Indigenous peoples, addressing issues such as employment, outreach, community knowledge, history and culture. And also, please provide a narrative description of past experience in securing resourcing, with a focus, among other things, on union agreements and any restrictions and market capacity and local capacity. During the RFQ process, requests for information. Please review the requirements in section 5.5 on how questions should be addressed to the authority and how requests for clarifications are to be submitted. The prospective respondents shall submit all requests for information, clarification or questions with respect to this RFQ, the competitive selection process or the project to the contact person by email using the form in Appendix G of the RFQ. The email address for the contact person is given there. Telephone requests will not be permitted. The Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority reserves the right to respond to requests that are received after 4 o'clock on local Windsor time on the 18th of September. Responses will be provided in both official languages, English and French. Regarding the response submissions, regarding the responses are detailed in sections 5.7 and 5.8 as well as Appendix B. Please review these sections carefully. There will be requirements for 10 copies of the submission and 2 USB storage keys. There are separate packages for the administrative information package, the technical information package, and the financial information package. The content of your response should be sufficiently comprehensive to enable the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority to evaluate the response. Each response must be received by the submission deadline at the submission location. Each submission must contain the proper signed response submission agreement and other forms in the appendices. These include the team member certification and agreement and the declaration regarding conflicts of interest and other matters. The forms are detailed in section 5.8 of the RFQ. Again, just to reiterate, the submission deadline is 2 p.m. local Windsor time on October 9th of 2015. And faxed or electronically submitted responses will not be accepted. And the submission location is the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority offices, located about 100 yards from here at 100 Alette Street. Regarding the evaluation framework and criteria, as detailed in section 6 of the RFQ, the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority will not open responses in public. The authority and its representatives will evaluate the responses according to the following procedure. The responses will be reviewed to determine if they're substantially complete, assessing whether the required information and forms have been provided in the response. Responses will then be reviewed to determine whether they pass the mandatory requirements. Any response that does not meet the mandatory requirements will not proceed any further. The Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority will appoint 2 or more evaluation teams to evaluate the technical information package and the financial information package. and the responses will be evaluated on the evaluation criteria as set out on 6.4 and Table 4, which is what you see on the screen. The Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority may require an interview with some or all of the respondents after commencement or completion of the initial technical and financial evaluations. The Fairness Monitor would be in attendance at these interviews. The evaluation teams will present their findings to an evaluation committee. Whose members will be appointed by the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority. The evaluation committee will recommend to the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority Board which respondents should be selected as proponents to participate in the RFP process based on the scores emerging from the technical and financial evaluations. So following approval by the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority, the contact person will advise all respondents of the outcome and whether or not they're selected. The evaluation criteria on the table includes criteria based on your general reputation, qualifications, industry experience, and safety record. It also requires experience related to development and execution of community benefits plans and community consultations. The technical and financial capacity without discrimination on the basis of nationality, and evidence of the capacity to obtain all the required payment and performance bonding, liability insurance, and errors and omissions insurance. The evaluation categories and weighting include the respondent team and approach to partnering, the design team approach to and experience, construction team approach and experience, operations and maintenance team approach and experience, tolling, and financial and financing experience. So to be considered as a qualified respondent, responses must comply with all requirements of the RFQ and meet all mandatory requirements. There are minimum number of points required for the design, the construction, and the finance sections of the response. And again, up to 3 highest ranked qualified respondents will be invited to proceed to the RFP. Just a note on the role of the Fairness Monitor. The Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority has engaged P1 Consulting as the Fairness Monitor for the duration of the procurement process to act as an objective third-party observer who monitors the procurement process to ensure that it is conducted in a fair, open, and transparent manner. The Fairness Monitor will oversee compliance with the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority's procurement process policies and guidelines, compliance with confidentiality and conflict of interest requirements, and the evaluation criteria and procedures are defined and applied fairly, objectively, and free of bias. These steps will help to ensure that all respondents and the proponents are treated fairly and equitably. The Fairness Monitor will actively participate throughout all stages of the procurement process, reviewing procurement documentation, attending formal meetings with the proponents, and observing all communications, both written and verbal. They will also be observing and validating the evaluation process. They will also be involved in investigating fairness issues as they occur, including advising on conflict of interest concerns as necessary. And they will also prepare a formal report at the conclusion of the procurement attesting to their observations. A note now regarding public comment, lobbying and improper conduct or contact. Please refer to section 7.8 of the RFQ for complete information on the restriction on public comment, lobbying and improper contact that apply during the competitive selection process, effective as of the date of issuance of the RFQ, through to execution of the project agreement. So to summarise, respondents shall not make any public comment, respond to questions in a public forum, or carry out activities to publicly promote or advertise their qualifications except for the purpose of forming teams to respond to the RFQ. And respondents are expected to conduct themselves with professional integrity with respect to the competitive selection process and the project. Respondents must not engage in any form of political or other lobbying with respect to the project. If there is a breach of any of the provisions regarding public comment, lobbying or improper contact, the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority may disqualify the respondent, reject any response by the respondent, require that the respondent change a respondent team member or key individual, or impose restrictions on the respondent. So please refer to section 7.11 of the RFQ for full information on the restriction on communication between respondents. A respondent shall not discuss or communicate directly or indirectly with any other respondent any information regarding the preparation of its own response or the response of another respondent. Each respondent shall prepare and submit its response independently and without any connection, knowledge, comparison of information or arrangement, direct or indirect, with any other respondent. Note on conflict of interest. For the purposes of the RFQ, the term conflict of interest includes any situation or circumstances where a respondent or a respondent team member or their respective representative or affiliate and or key individual could be perceived to have or could possibly acquire contractual or other obligations to the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority that could impair the procurement process. If they have knowledge or information that's not available to the respondents, giving an unfair competitive advantage, or if there are commitments, relationships and financial interests that could result in improper influence. A restricted party is a person who had or currently has participation or involvement in a competitive selection process, or may provide a material unfair advantage or material confidential information to any respondent who is not or would not reasonably be expected to be available to other respondents. Any respondent who has concerns whether a current or prospective team member has a conflict of interest is encouraged to request an advance ruling. All of these requests for advance rulings will be treated in confidence. And with regard to this, please refer to sections 7.13 through 7.18 regarding the matters of conflict of interest, restricted parties, and advance rulings. The Industry Day this afternoon is an opportunity for potential respondents to meet and network with the local, regional and national contractors, suppliers and service providers, and for the local businesses to showcase themselves to potential private sector partners. So we hope that many of you take full advantage of this opportunity to meet one another this afternoon. And with that, I think this concludes the formal part of the presentation, and I can hand you back to Heather. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. As I mentioned earlier, if you have registered for this afternoon's Industry Day, please visit the registration table on the first floor prior to 1 o'clock p.m. to pick up the list of attendees and to pick up your table assignment. The Industry Day session will occur on the second floor of this session in the Skyline Room. Should you have any questions following today's session, please follow the request for information process as outlined in the RFQ. Also, should you choose to complete an evaluation survey of today's session, please pick one up at the registration table on the first floor. Thank you again for attending the introductory project meeting, and thank you very much for your interest in the Gordie Howe International Bridge. That concludes our session today.